Welcome to the first of our Dyslexia Diaries podcasts. In this episode, we'll be exploring the amazing story of Michelle, and we'll be talking through her struggles, her successes, and her plans for the future. I hope you enjoy it.
It's quite a story, actually, how this came about. It all came about because I'm relatively new within kind of running my own business. I made a point of putting a bit of a post up on Facebook, and on Maeta, who's a friend of mine and a fantastic psychotherapist who you will be hearing from this evening, shared my post. And Michelle, I don't know whether she's happy about this now or not, commented on it and basically said, "This is amazing. I read a book that just really, sang to me in terms of my experience that I've been through." So I was looking through this and said, that sounds very familiar. And I put a picture up and I said, "It wasn't that book by any chance, was it?" And sure enough, it was. So that started a bit of a conversation between myself, Michelle, Maeta, in terms of why this resonated so much and why it was so impactful and why it made such a difference to Michelle after years of, again, we'll hear more about that journey in a moment, like years of uncertainty almost. And even though we've got Dr. Neil Alexander-Passe with us, the author of this fantastic book, this isn't a sponsored evening. There we go. He's bought 10 of his own, I'm sure. What I would say is, again, I'm very thankful to have Dr. Neil Alexander-Passe with us this evening because, again, I just put a general book recommendation on LinkedIn off the back of having that interaction with Michelle and speaking to Maeta and talking it through. And I thought, you know what a powerful, powerful book this is. And sure enough, Dr. Neil saw the post, messaged me, and without any payment or any form of bribery, he's here this evening to get involved also. So I think it probably only right for you to introduce yourself, because I will only do you a disservice, I think. So over to you to introduce yourself.
Me, right? Okay.
Yes.
I am Neil. Please call me Neil. I'm a Senko in a secondary school in North London. I am dyslexic myself, and I gained my PhD about 2 years ago for my 50th birthday, and it looked at dyslexia, traumatic schooling, and post-school success. So it is about using your school-based trauma to do well in life, and really to find out why these keys to doing well, and also looking at why some dyslexics may not do well, and really help them turn it around.
Fantastic, brilliant. And again, for those who maybe joined us a little bit later as well, what Neil's going to do this evening as part of this is, if you could send questions directly to Neil related to Michelle's journey. And again, the thinking is to see where Neil can make correlations between his own research, Michelle's journey, and again, looking to see where there's I suppose some consistencies there, or maybe how there's some contrasts there. So if you could make a point in the chat, if you do click on the chat, you'll notice that you've got the opportunity. It'll have a blue box maybe that says everyone. If you can make a point, folks, just to direct it to ensure that the chat goes to Neil, it just means then he's got a good amount of time to be able to formulate a response as we come to the kind of Q&A aspect towards the end of the podcast. So, in terms of the other, I suppose, VIPs we've got with us this evening, we've got Maeta Brown and we've got Michelle Warner, who's going to be talking through her journey. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment. But before we kind of jump into that, I just think it's important to highlight as well, when it comes to dyslexia, when it comes to the journey that people have been on, I think many of you will agree that there's still a journey to go on. But I still feel as if, despite all the great work that's been going on in terms of research and whatnot, we're still a long way to getting the kind of support and structures in place to ensure that people with dyslexia feel fully kind of included within society. And as we hear some of Michelle's story this evening, there are some bits that I won't lie, the first time I heard it, it was like head in hands, like complete anger at some of the ways in which barriers are being put in place and whatnot. And, you know, I'm sure, again, as we hear them, a lot of them will resonate with us in terms of stuff we've experienced ourselves, especially for those with dyslexia or any other learning needs. So I think part of this evening, hopefully we'll start to break down some of those barriers, improve that level of empathy, and will mean that this discussion becomes more normalized and people will understand that dyslexia isn't something in isolation. It can incorporate a holistic number of things, and can have a great impact on people. And again, with this, look at that, that's a great background, Dr. Neil, I like that, fantastic. So in terms of all of those different books, you know, they will be making a big difference in terms of getting people to understand what they're doing. And for me, the way I always think about it is, when it comes to the different definitions of kind of disability, there's the medical model of disability and the social model of disability. And the medical model is very much that the problem lies with the person with the disability. You should be outcast from society almost, it's your fault. So in lots of ways, thankfully, we've moved away from the medical model in lots of what we do. You know, if you think about the way in which the curbs have been pedestrianised, so people with wheelchairs can use them better, just as a silly example. Whereas in contrast, when it comes to people with dyslexia, there is a general, I think often overlooked aspect of, we are creating barriers for learners with dyslexia or people with dyslexia all of the time. And again, it's more of an ignorance thing. You know, people aren't doing it purposefully. But I think understanding that, again, hopefully will mean that we can expand that knowledge and look to bring it forward to get better results for people. So with that being said, I'm going to be quiet for a little bit. I'm going to hand over to the amazing Maeta, and I'll let her introduce Michelle, and we're going to go from there.
Hello. So yes, I'm Maeta. Mark actually brought me on as the resident therapist for CogDev, and we both agree on the importance of having mental health support for people who, you know, work through dyslexia and the different ways that they navigate that. I'm really delighted to be working with Mark because I'm just so passionate about mental health support for people who either aren't neurotypical or just don't thrive in the very homogenous education systems and societal systems that we have. As Mark was saying, so often people are made to feel that they're the problem. So we have a massive, very unreflexive culture of kind of looking at the person and blaming them for not fitting into a mold, rather than looking at a rigid mold and thinking, well, that's not fit for purpose. And it has a profound impact on a person's self-worth, their anxiety levels, their confidence, their direction, their overall well-being, and those effects can be really lasting. So a lot of the work I do is around trying to unlearn a lot of the rubbish that's projected onto people about their identity and their capacity because they don't fit into that mold, and the quite intense shame that can leave people with. Hopefully working towards people being a lot more unapologetic about seeking environments and support systems that work for them so that they can thrive and flourish in the environment they're in. But it's really hard because societal messages are strong, they're pervasive, they're still everywhere. I agree with Mark that I'm cautiously optimistic about the direction things are going in. I work with a lot of young people, and I'm hearing more and more positive stories about people who are not necessarily neurotypical or just don't fit into the system in an easy way. But there's still such a long way to go, and particularly for people who, you know, were diagnosed later in their life, the impact is huge. And patterns and associations form, so people get so used to hiding, overcompensating, being branded in certain ways, anticipating failure. Just the anxiety that can be associated then with environments is really, really hard stuff for people to unlearn, and the effects are really like long-term and ongoing. So yeah, I'm really passionate about it, and whilst it's getting better, you know, there's such a long way to go. And so many of the clients that I work with who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s just have had such traumatic experiences, as I'm sure Neil can attest to in a lot of his research, that have a really lasting impact. And that's why we're here. And that's why Michelle has so bravely, very bravely, because she's had to overcome a lot of anxiety to be here and talk about this, which is part and parcel of you know, what we'll be speaking about. she's generously going to share with us her story and how it's impacted on her, because I think nothing speaks to people like someone's direct experience. So we've agreed with Michelle that the way that this feels kind of least overwhelming and intimidating is if she's shared with Mark and I a bit of a timeline that in itself was a pretty challenging thing to write, wasn't it, Michelle? So
It was.
So she shared that with us, and I'm just going to kind of run through that with Michelle and ask her questions basically about some of the experiences she's had and how that's related to her mental health. And Mark will kind of chip in as we go with some of his insight and expertise, and kind of so we give Michelle a bit of a break from the limelight being on her. But yeah, Michelle and I work together at the Marketplace, which is a mental health charity for young people, counselling and youth work charity. And Mark's told you the story of how Michelle got involved, which I think she's 50-50 about that. Maybe you said you hardly use social media, right, Michelle? And
Pretty much. I
the one
basically
time
never
you
post.
yeah, and here you So if I just dive in and just start us off by, you know, the very start of your timeline. I know you said that there's a lot of kind of gaps in your memory from when you were younger, and there's a lot of background stuff that was going on in your home life as well that was, you know, impactful at the time. But basically you remember really struggling at school with reading, writing, understanding and concentration, to the point where you were actually scared to say yes during the register. So do you want to kind of just take us back a bit to that time and what you do remember about those struggles and how that felt when you were a young child?
It's weird to kind of remember, actually, because I forgot about all of that until I was like doing this with you guys, and I was like, yeah, there actually was a point in my life where I couldn't even answer the register because the idea of speaking in public and what if I did it wrong somehow, even though quite literally the word is yes or here, like when your name is called. And because I'm Warner, I'm obviously at the end of the register, so you've got to go through every single person to get to you. And the more that happened, the more it was built up, like, oh my God, I'm actually going to speak out loud, I'm going to speak out loud. Yeah. But I can remember that being like just horrendous, and probably people who know me now in life probably think that's mad that I was so silent. I was silent so much at school, certainly primary school and high school, because if I spoke, it was just terrifying. I would just get it wrong. I couldn't articulate the words correctly. I couldn't form sentences. I couldn't work out how to put across what I wanted to say. And I still struggle with that, actually. I find that really hard. I can remember being in like English classes and they make you stand up and like read a paragraph from like a book or something, and I would just no, it was just impossible. It'd be like the same line again and again, and then just sheer panic and terror. And again, it'd be like, no, I just cannot speak. I just don't want to be that person in class. I do not want to talk. And it was like, I'd rather just be silent the entire way through school.
Yeah.
Probably not greatly helpful at the time.
No, horrible.
That was what I did.
Yeah, so much fear then, the fear of getting it wrong as like the dominant feeling of just like the scrutiny that would put on you. And it's probably worth me saying at this point, actually, which I should have said at the start, just that, you know, we've talked a lot before this, haven't we, Michelle? And you've obviously consented to talking about your experiences, but some of it might be upsetting, and it still might be upsetting now to talk about. So Michelle knows that at any point she can just say, I don't really want to talk about that, or I'd just like a pause, or, you know, we can take a time out at any point or move over anything. And just the same for everyone, really. If Michelle's journey really resonates with you and there's anything that feels difficult and you just need a breather, please just, you know, take the time to look after yourselves, because it's emotionally difficult stuff. And, you know, there's lots of parts of Michelle's journey that are quite emotional, aren't they, and impactful. So we need to make sure we look after ourselves. So yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think just to jump in just for a second there as well, I think in terms of what Michelle describes there as well, I think there's a big thing to take into account in terms of the generational impact of dyslexia and when you were going through school. and therefore how well you could see the teaching and learning strategies that were put in place. So stand up, read from the book, all eyes on you. So that level of avoidance tactics that can then start coming into play, where we hear instances of where people have felt like that in the past, where truancy becomes an issue. So all of a sudden you've got a cold every single day, and it's not actually a cold, it's the fact that you've got to stand up in front of everybody. And that was the way in which it would go. So I think what you described there in terms of those early those early concerns is quite typical in lots of ways, and also what you described there about being W, so therefore being at the end. I think that's a really important thing. And again, it's as part of my role as a teacher educator, I always talk about the subtleties, those marginal gains that make a difference. And even doing something as simple as ensuring that one day you start from A and the next day you start from Z, and you can just swap it round and just change it, and just so each day you've got a little bit of respite, or you just don't feel quite as, oh, I've got to sit there again. It's just, again, it's quite telling that something so simple can be so impactful. And I've again, the fact you can still remember it now says a lot, doesn't it? But anyway, back over to you, Maeta.
It still happens now. If I'm in a room and they're going around the room and you have to all say something, the closer it gets to me, the more panicked I get that I'm going to have to speak or say something, and that it's all going to go wrong. And so things like team meetings or conversations with friends, sometimes if I'm oh, I want to say something, but oh no, I can't. And even though they might be a really good friend, I can, sometimes it's much harder to actually join in the conversation because you just don't feel like you're going to be able to explain yourself very well. So even more so if you're then in some kind of a discussion, or at school you have to do debating, or I'm doing a course now and I have to obviously input, and that's terrifying sometimes until I'm in it and I'm less bothered, but it's really hard to get over that from then. So it's I remember it very well.
Again, it's an interesting thing that, again, it's something that I generally teach, is the whole, for a number of reasons really, but again, if you imagine you've got 10 people in a room, if you start with that person there and you go to the next person and you go to the next person, for one, whoever's number 8, 9 or 10 is thinking what they're going to have for tea, because they know they've got 10 minutes while someone's describing themselves or whatever they're doing. But so really generally I would bounce it around the room who you'd go to. But another thing to consider is we should personalize and individualize our approach to things. So if we know whether we've got a learner with dyslexia in our classroom or a person with dyslexia in our meeting room, it should be a conversation before to say, what is your preference? Because again, short-term memory is a big issue when it comes to dyslexia. So you may have a fleeting thought that comes in, you go, oh, eureka, fantastic. And the next thing you know, it's disappeared. So I know when I was teaching previously, someone would have a red, amber and green card, and they just go green, like as if to say, come to me next, otherwise it's going to disappear. So you'd go to them, you'd say it, confidence is built, everyone's happy. So again, the key phrase is reasonable adjustments, and a reasonable adjustment to say, Michelle, whenever you want to go, just give me one of them, and then to go in. I mean, don't do that, you look a bit silly like me. But in terms of what you could do, it's something in terms of what others can do, again, to make things accessible. The small things, they are really small things.
Yeah, and the sooner that they happen, so if that's just the environment that somebody grows up in with those kind of adjustments and that support, then the stigma and the pressure and the embarrassment that Michelle's experience doesn't build. So now Michelle's got a lifetime of that she's combating, because it wasn't there when you were at school. Quite the opposite, right? Literally no support, no recognition, no kind of education or understanding about what was going on for you. And so it becomes harder and harder to combat. So now even in a group situation like that, where Michelle might wave, that you've still got all of that history, haven't you, and that anxiety about what it means to speak in public, which again is why it's so amazing and brave that you're here doing this and speaking about this stuff, when that's such a big thing for you to overcome. So I guess in terms of your avoidance technique, it was to stay quiet, right? Stay as quiet as possible to avoid getting things wrong. You mentioned that you failed pretty much any subject involving English writing, so English, history, but you were really good at maths and you really wanted to study maths and psychology at A level. but you weren't allowed.
No, because I failed English. So I
Yeah.
wasn't allowed to study either psychology or maths. I was kind of shuffled into, ironically, performing arts. Actually, somebody who was in my performing arts group is actually watching now, so that's good. But it wasn't exactly where I thought my forte would be. And it
what was it like? Terrible.
In what I didn't realize back then, that you had the potential to choose your own like college, because my like sixth form was attached to my school. It was just, you just go up the years. So when they said that I couldn't do maths and I couldn't do psychology, then I just took that as, oh, all right then. And they're like, this is your option. Like, oh, okay. And I had friends that were going into that option, so I kind of felt like, well, at least I can hang out with my friends. So I just kind of went with it. But I still had to get up and go on stage.
Yeah. So not only are you doing something that's like pretty uncomfortable and not really what you're passionate about, but you're literally being told you can't do that, things that you're actually good at because of English. And you mentioned that you retook English 3 times during that period when you did your BTEC. What a demoralizing experience that must have been.
Yeah, just to try and get a C in whichever one I could get one in. I don't even remember now which it was.
Yeah.
With that,
describe English.
With that in mind, Michelle, in terms of English and trying to get that C, just out of curiosity, was it a case of, right, Michelle, you're going to go through it, you failed the first one, and was it just a case of, we're just going to teach you the exact same way and expect all of a sudden for you to have a eureka moment? Or no change in approach, no nothing, no questions next. About why you may be struggling?
No, I was never questioned or spoken to or like anything like that at all at school. It was just, yeah, you're not very good at English, and you're not very good at speaking, and you're not very good at this. Like, I know that. Thanks. So yeah, just
again, the only reason I highlight that again is something that I find. I've been teaching for 13 years now. I'm getting old. So been teaching for 13 years now, and what I find as well, it's a strange thing, and maybe this is just my experience, so don't want to generalize too much, but if you have somebody who's struggling and you're teaching them the way that you would teach everybody else, and yet they're still struggling, if you were to read any dyslexia book, that is the kind of the warning that you need, that conventional teaching methods do not work. That is what is basically the canary down the coal mine. And what you find is that some teachers, rightly so in some ways, well, not rightly so, they just lack confidence in being able to meet specific needs, like dyslexia, like ASD, whatever it might be. And again, anyone who's been on my previous training courses, I highlight this, the fact that I'm qualified at PGCE for post-compulsory, and yet a number of people have been on my courses are qualified PGCE for secondary or primary, and yet there's very little in there in relation to special educational needs or disability, and yet teachers are still expected to be able to meet the plethora of needs that are in the classroom. And that's now, we've moved along forward from the 90s and the noughties, maybe when you would have been in college. So we'll say it was the noughties. We'll call it the noughties. But in terms of that, I think it's the only reason I highlight that, as I say, is because there's still a massive gap in knowledge with teachers. And I think there just needs to be a general change about how teachers are trained in the first place. So it just, again, what I'm getting at is that the difficulty, unfortunately, is all the onus is put on you as the learner. It's you who's the problem, not the fact that my teaching methods are no longer working. So therefore I should adapt and change things, So I just think that's important to highlight.
Yeah. And the impact of that, right? You've got to attempt for having experienced failing 3 times, and the impact that has each time, and then each time it's told, no, you're not very good at this, you need to do better, you need to work harder. There's so much associated with that, whether it's you're not, I don't know how many dyslexic people have heard the phrase, you're not trying hard enough. And just the onus that's put on you and your responsibility to do something that just, your brain isn't, equipped to do with the tools that you've been given. And that, the frustration and the sense of, I don't know, how did it feel? I mean, I'm frustrated just hearing about it. What are your feelings when you think about that time?
Yeah, pretty crap, pretty lonely, like, and quite sort of demoralizing, because it's like, I just can't do this, but I have to, because everywhere it was like, no, you have to get a C, so you have to keep going until you do. It's like, oh god. But yeah, just all I can think is demoralizing and lonely, I think. Just why am I trying to do this? Why should I bother? Kind of thing. Because I had no plans after like doing the BTEC, because I was like, well, I'm not going to uni, obviously. So I was like, why should I bother? But I got that C. Getting the C, ironically, that felt great. I still can't tell if it was in literature or language, because I genuinely don't know the difference.
Well, let's just take a minute to celebrate the fact that you had the perseverance and the courage to just keep on going. I mean, that's amazing.
What a slog, eh? So yeah, you weren't going to uni, right? So you didn't go to uni at that point. You've put on your timeline, what would have been the point? So that was genuinely how you felt at that point, isn't it? Yeah.
What would I have studied? I did not want to continue in performing arts. Like, it was fine for what it was at that point, but
it's
not for me.
Yeah. And so you kind of ended up just working bars and restaurants and stuff, and then you went traveling, right, with a friend when you were 22, 23. And the friend you went with had graduated with the first combined honours in maths and physics, so big academic. And you said just the experience of being alongside her and having to introduce yourself to people and say, oh yeah, I work in a bar, or you use the word soul destroying, that comparison, that's an important aspect, isn't it? That you end up comparing yourself to people who have flourished academically and feeling that kind of lack. It's really hard.
Yeah, and we were the same age at that point, because it had been a friend that I'd had, or no, not at the same school, but we'd been the same age, but then ended up living together in Leeds, even though neither of us were from Leeds, but we ended up together here, and then went traveling. And yeah, I obviously do not begrudge the fact that she was incredibly academically gifted. That's great, but it felt really horrendous when you're meeting new people, as you obviously do when you're traveling. And everyone's like, so yeah, what do you do? And I was like, I work in a bar. It's like, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you then sat with somebody else, like, yeah, I got a maths and physics combined honours first, you're like, okay. Like, I can remember the look on people's faces being like, okay, and then look back at her again as like, I'll go over there then, shall I? Kind of, yeah. So it was just, sort of pushed out until you found people that didn't really care about that.
And that's almost like a mini snapshot of how it feels on that bigger level as well, when you feel excluded from something, you can't really do that, let's look at all the people that can. And the kind of accolade that comes along with academic success of, that's very impressive, or and then somebody who hasn't gone to university, who hasn't done A-levels or whatever, the dismissal, that feeling of being dismissed and sidelined and kind of just feeling embarrassed and ashamed of like where you're at in life. That's a really hard one to overcome, isn't it?
Yeah, very, because many of the people that we met were around about the same age, so they just finished uni, so it was all this kind of like, oh, we've been doing this and we've been doing this, and I was like, yeah, I haven't.
I think it's quite interesting with that, in the sense of, I don't know, I was kind of looking through your timeline again today, and I was just like trying to kind of analyze a little bit and kind of look at things, and again, reading this and just kind of linking it all together. And there was something in there related to the fact that generally what happens is, if you struggle through school, you'll be put in sets with people. Again, sorry, just backtrack ever so slightly. Dyslexia and intelligence aren't linked, in short. So you can be incredibly intelligent and still be dyslexic. Okay, it doesn't matter at all. And the reason why I've thought to caveat what I'm about to say with that is the fact that in the book, it states how, there are some people who will get put in a lower set, so therefore will end up doing more vocational type, to be stereotypical, they'd be doing woodwork or they'd be doing something else, whereas their actual friends, the people who they connect with on an intellectual and almost like spiritual level, they will go in a different direction, in the sense that, and then all of a sudden you kind of split between the two, and maybe you've got two camps where you'll be with your people in class who, you probably still get on with them, but when you go and socialize at lunch or whatever, you're going back to your other friends because really they're on more of your plane, if you will. You can kind of align yourself with them a little bit more. And the reason why I highlight that is because I think it says a lot, the fact that, you are friends with someone with an incredible degree. And I'm sure you probably had lots of conversations with her about her degree, and you were very inquisitive about it. So I suppose that's more of a comment from me. I don't know whether there's any thoughts coming to you, Michelle, related to that. I was just kind of, I was looking at it and going, interesting. Yes, Dr. Neil has got a good point there.
But if say I may join in there. Say that you remove the barrier of the writing, you would be in those middle to top sets with your friends. It's purely the barrier of the writing which is forcing you down. So there were kids being judged on their writing and not on their oral feedback to a class or to a discussion point.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really resonates with you, doesn't it, Michelle? Like, you were really good at maths, and here is your friend with a maths degree. That could have been something you did had you not been told, oh no, you're not allowed to do A-level maths because you failed English. And like just that sense of not quite fitting, you don't fit in with the people that were doing the performing arts BTEC. That wasn't your thing, and yet you were blocked from the spaces that you would have maybe thrived more in because of your reading and writing, essentially. Yeah.
It's weird
and
thinking about it like that. Like, oh God.
Yeah, it's really sad, and that's kind of jumping to the end a bit, but that's something you put at the end of your timeline, is just that feeling of not quite fitting in and feeling behind or separate or marginalized, sidelined in some way, that you just don't quite fit in with the different groups of people in your life. That that's something that started way back then.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're back from traveling, and you are reading The Big Issue, and you see a volunteer placement with community service volunteers, and you head out and work with adults with learning difficulties, right, in Norfolk. And you describe that period as amazing. You found it hard, but you kind of felt, wow, I really can do this.
Yeah, it was hard when I first went because I'd never done anything like that in my life. And then I went from saying that I would do a commitment of like 4 months, which is like the basic lowest amount. I ended up staying for the whole year, which was their maximum allowed, because I just loved it. I just loved working with my colleagues, but I loved working with the people that came and used the service, and finding that I could actually, find different ways of connecting with all these people, and different ways that we could spend time together. And like it was almost like an educational service, but also not an educational service. It's really hard to explain what we actually did there in some senses. But there were times where we did things that were, I quite enjoyed finding ways to help and to get the people, whoever was in my group that day, to understand, like a shared understanding of something. And that was really, I found it really great. So by the end of it, I was just like, oh, this is easy. This is great. And I found something I could actually do. So that was really, really nice. Then, that came to an end after the year, and I was like, oh, now what?
Yeah. But I mean, in a lot of ways, who better to help people who are marginalized by their educational needs or learning disabilities than somebody who's experienced what it's like to be kind of left on the outside of that window. You know, you're there helping them come in and thinking outside the box and using like the fact that you are not neurotypical to help connect these people, and you're doing something for them that was never done for you. There's something so powerful about that. You know, we talk a lot about the wounded healer, but who better than experience that marginalization to help people who need to access things in a different way? So in a lot of ways that must have resonated on a level for you, whether you were aware of it or not, where you're like, oh yeah, actually I can connect with this and I can help these people and I'm good at doing that.
Yeah, I don't think until you've just said it like that I even realized the connection, because at that point I didn't know that I was dyslexic. I obviously knew that I was stopped from doing a lot of things, but I had no idea why. I was just assumed, as the teachers kind of did, that I was just basically stupid, so couldn't do these things. So yeah. But yeah, that sounds quite nice, thanks.
So yeah, that ended and there was a bit of a what now, but then again along comes the to the rescue with an
By
adult.
the way, I didn't know anyone read the big issue when they actually bought it. It's good to know that people read it when they buy it. That's fantastic.
On
Good
my
to know.
bus journey to and from London at the time, because my placement the volunteering was in a little town in Norfolk, and I would go on trips to meet friends and stuff in other places, and so on the journey I would sit and read the big issue.
Perfect. See, I need to make sure to buy it myself then next time I'm in Liverpool City Centre. Brilliant.
Good stuff in it. So you saw an ad for like an adult college for people who'd basically missed out on education, who wanted to give it a try. It was funded. You signed up to Scotland you went, and you basically say that you flourished there academically for the first time ever. And you were honest with them about your struggles, and rather than being met with, oh well, you can't do that, then you were met with, here's a bit of a screening, we think you're probably dyslexic, here's some ideas, and that just allowed you to flourish.
Yeah, I actually did well in stuff. I struggled a bit in history. I think that's because historically that's never been a good subject of mine. I enjoy the subject. I can never remember enough of it to then write your answers. And then you're being marked on how you're writing and what you're writing.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't until way later that I realized why that's so difficult. It's like, I'm interested in this topic. Why can't I get it done? But that place, they, I don't know, they just taught it differently somehow, or they talked through it with me differently somehow. And like I took some politics classes, and I even got 100% in some of those things, because it was just, you just needed to make, your written answer just had to make the reader understand that you knew what you were talking about, but he wasn't necessarily bothered how, if your grammar was correct or if your spelling was correct, just that you understood what you were talking about. And there was a woman there, because it was Scottish Highers, so it's ever so slightly different to the English one. So this is why I have no idea what I've actually got in education, to be honest, because it baffles me. But yeah, she was like, yeah, okay, let's look at this and do the screening, and kind of came up with some thoughts around it, and it started to make a lot of sense, like what she was explaining, what it meant, because I don't think I'd heard of it at the time, not clearly. So yeah, just kind of that way.
What was that like, emotionally, having that experience of like, oh wow, I'm actually doing well here?
Weird.
Yeah.
I was never doing well. I remember one of the teachers sort of suggesting one of the other students who was struggling in one of the subjects come and study with me, because I was doing well, and sort of like, if we studied together, that maybe obviously we'd be able to kind of learn together and what have you. But that never happened to me before. I was never the person, except for in maths, obviously at school, I was never the person someone was like put with to study. Like, oh God. I was the person begging somebody else to tell me what else I'm supposed to do, because I didn't get it. But somehow it made sense. I don't know if it was like the timing for me was better somehow, or I'd just the pace was better somehow, or just the environment. Something just worked, and the subjects were different because they didn't do English exactly. It was communication was the word there, at least in this place. So it was like an arts and social sciences. So it had the psychology. Finally got to study psychology. That was so exciting. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I knew it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just felt like good, like I could actually do something, you know, more than what I had been doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. What a positive experience. But it's telling the first word you used was weird. It was positive and it was great, but there was that sense of, oh, this is a bit alien. I'm not this person. And like, that's something that I think resonates now, talking to you and having talked about doing this, and how much it can jar with you when other people point out, oh, you're good at that, or that's something that you can do. Your instinct is, oh no, I can't, and then it feels weird that you can. Does that kind of resonate?
I feel like that's pretty much every conversation me, you and Mark have had. You're good at this. No, I'm not.
Yeah. So that how alien it was after your entire educational system being pretty much negative, to have that positive experience was brilliant, but almost jarring. That like, oh, this feels weird.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to do after that. I'm not gonna lie. It was nice. It was to kind of get these results and be like, oh, actually got to do this. And then in like the second semester, I actually got to study what I chose, which is really, I've never been able to study something I've chosen before. So that was really good. And again, I actually did well in it.
Yeah, of course you did, because you wanted to do it and you're interested and you were being assessed in a way that worked for you. But I mean, again, it's kind of tinged with sadness, isn't it, that you would get to, how old were you, 26 when you went there, and you'd never been able to choose ever what you wanted to learn and what you were interested in and what you wanted to do. That had been blocked for you at pretty much every path until that point. And that just sucks, doesn't it, basically?
For want of a better word, yeah.
So you finished there.
Sorry, Mai, just to jump in on it, but just a little bit of something that Michelle mentioned about, I suppose, the teaching approaches. Is there something that you meant that are kind of hooked in on there, Michelle? You said something about the teacher got you to think differently and to kind of look at different approaches to probably how you could learn. And I think the reason why I highlight that is because for anyone who knows me on this call will know that I'm kind of trying to start a cult all around metacognition and how important it is. And it's almost the only reason I highlight that is I almost feel as if, from what you describe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds as if this teacher was trying to empower you, was trying to give you strategies where you could think for yourself with greater level of confidence, or having a general method or process or path to follow to get you towards the direction you want to go in. In terms of what I've just described there, does that sound similar to what sounds like an amazing teacher that you had up there?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember everything that she actually kind of said to me, but we kind of looked at different ways of studying, different ways of trying to retain information, or even like writing tools. I was always much more comfortable writing in pencil. So she's like, write in pencil, if that makes you more comfortable for the majority of it. There were certain things that had to be done in pen. Like my favorite was always blue. I find I can't write in black pen, it's weird, but blue I can do. I don't understand that one. And she gave me like overlays and stuff to have a go with, lots of different colors to kind of try out, see if that like helped. We talked about lighting in different rooms, and what's the lighting like in the library, what's the lighting like in certain other rooms within like the place, just because it was beautiful. It was a Cistercian abbey. I never did show you the pictures.
Wow.
So some of the rooms, it was so quite old, and therefore the lighting was kind of fixed, and there wasn't a great deal I could do about some of that. But she looked at ways that I could sort of individualize it, and like we looked at different where to sit in the class that might be better. And yeah, that was just nice. It was nice to like have someone listen, I guess.
It's so telling, isn't it? Because what you described there, it's nothing crazy. There's no smoke and mirrors going on. It's a nice few little different, again, reasonable adjustments that could be made to ensure that you can access learning. So yes, I think that's just I just wanted to go through that. Thank you.
Yeah, so having had that empowering experience for the first time in education, you went on to do a degree, right? So careers advisor who visited the college suggested social work to kind of combine your interests and your skills, and you got on and you went to do a social work degree, and that was when you finally actually got a dyslexia diagnosis, right? And you said then like everything changed and it made sense. I wasn't actually stupid. Like that sounds like a pretty big moment for you.
Yes. Yeah, I got on it. I remember them saying like it may be difficult or challenging to get on the social work course, but if you get on, then you should definitely go for it. But he was like, you should definitely apply. And I did, and I couldn't believe I got on, so that was great. And yeah, I remember doing the assessment. It was like obviously like a series of logic tests and stuff. The logic ones I flew through. I had no issue with any of those. They were just like games I quite enjoy playing now. But other ones, oh, they were horrible. And I can remember she said, like at the end of it, and she kind of gave me like a preliminary report, and then kind of put out, she obviously sent me the rest of it in the post and everything. She said I had some of the highest marks she'd ever seen in some of the like more logic side of things, in those ones, which told of like an intelligence, and I was like, I'm not intelligent. But then equally some of the lowest scores in kind of the writing, my writing ability, and then like a processing kind of time or way or something. And that kind of led her to be very distinctive in saying like, it's definitely this, and these are your specific areas that you struggle in. But that because of the other areas, it was like that I actually had like quite a high intelligence, which seemed, again, I don't want to use the word weird, but like alien. We'll go with alien. It felt alien. It's like, I'm not intelligent, but yeah, she's like, it's because of the vast difference between the two. It was really striking to her. So I was like, oh, okay.
What, again, alien, weird first response, right? What was the impact of kind of having that validation of someone saying, look, you're really smart, this is how your brain works, and these are the things that you struggle with? And I imagine describing quite accurately the stuff that you'd been struggling with your whole life. What was that like?
Quite overwhelming, but also quite, I guess, reassuring that there was like some reasons behind some of the stuff that had been like going on. I can't go back in time, obviously, but like it made certain parts of things make sense, I guess, and it gave me some kind of not courage, but I can't think of what the appropriate word is, but because I mean social work has like a lot of written, it can be incredibly academic, and the demand is very high, even though that's not what you expect when you go into it, but it is. So I think it gave me some form of like, I guess confidence, but also ability maybe, or understanding of how to go about making sure that I could do well in the academic side of that, because you have to.
And part of that, right, was applying for DSA. So you know, and that was something, disabled student allowance for those that don't know, but that was something that you hated, right? That application. was for numerous reasons something that you really hated. Why did that jar with you so much, do you think?
It was just so weird to think of myself as disabled. And I was like, oh, but to get certain other things I had to do this. So eventually I had to be like, right, okay, well, let's just apply for this. But then to apply for the DSA, numerous amounts of like paperwork, and paperwork is not my forte. Especially when it's very confusing questions, and I was like, I need someone to translate the paperwork for me so that I can fill it in. Obviously did eventually, and did all of that, and obviously the funding made that I could have certain equipment and certain, you know, various other things to kind of like help me. So it was worth doing, but it was really hard to do. Yeah.
The irony of how.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think
on,
that
Mark.
When it comes to, first of all, the name of it, I think you're quite right to highlight, you know, disabled students allowance. It's straight away, it's almost like a label that has a stigma attached, and you maybe want to push it away. And I think it's quite interesting to see how, in terms of the fact that you were 27 by the time you were able to actually go through this process, which again, I think is very, unfortunately, very typical of how the education system, I suppose, would have been during your time in school during the 80s, 90s, and so on, at that early stage where I always remember, like, in the 90s, dyslexia was just kind of something in the background that people kind of mentioned. And then in the noughties, it really became quite prevalent. And then the issue that you had in the noughties is that people who couldn't spell onomatopoeia or supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, all of a sudden they were dyslexic because they couldn't spell those words. So those who were actually dyslexic, I suppose their struggles were minimized almost during those times. But I think it'd be quite interesting to see what difference it would have made to you if you'd actually been highlighted when you should have been. I mean, you can be assessed as early as 7. That's when you can officially be diagnosed with dyslexia. So, you know, just imagine what difference that could make in terms of 2 decades of understanding of how your neurodiversity works, benefits you, gets in your way, you know, all those things. So I think it's quite telling the difference it can make when you've shaped yourself within a society that, as Neil was saying before, about the whole thing about being excluded because of writing, and writing is king, and therefore if you can't do that, then there's an issue. You know, it's just again, it's quite telling how that process can make such a big difference in terms of your overall self-worth and whatnot.
Yeah, I remember people just saying, oh, it's just that you can get extra time and a free laptop.
Yeah, there's a lot of that as well in terms of the why do you get extra time in exams? You shouldn't get extra time. So there's lots of that again in terms of the not understanding. And again, if again, I do an activity in one of my sessions where I put a slide up with a lot of writing on it all at once, and kind of put it up there on purpose so other people can feel the fear of having to try to read through a slide really quickly in line with other people, trying to keep pace and then get asked questions. Because, you know, again, a little simple thing, have animations, have things coming up one at a time instead of all at once. But the amount of fear that can create in people, and therefore you no longer read the top 2/3, you just read the bottom third, hoping you get asked a question on that bottom third. So again, it's just all very interesting how things get thrown in the way.
Yeah, totally. And of course, a big part of getting that support late is that you'd already developed your way of coping and masking, and, you know, you'd become so good at kind of functioning in a way that tried to mask those difficulties from others and from yourself, that when you were kind of given strategies, it felt like, oh, but it's too late for me to learn these strategies. I have my strategies. And it all felt quite jarring, right? At that point, that you were being introduced to all these ways of doing things that might help you. And yet you'd had 20 odd years of doing things your way to try and cope with it.
Yeah, I found the new strategies difficult. Like I still don't get mine that way, but it works for me.
Yeah.
So I stuck with it. Apparently, I take longer to do things, but I was like, well, that's nothing new.
Yeah.
But this could be quicker, maybe. But I'm not mastering it. It's just not going in. I'm going to stay with what's working. But it's just great to know why, and have that kind of understanding, I guess, and have my punctuation not be a reason for failing an entire degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, at this stage, we came across some IT gremlins, so I thought I'd paraphrase what I said before I go back into the main podcast. So Maeta goes on to ask Michelle about her experiences as she moved into her master's degree. And Michelle describes that one of the main differences in terms of her being able to really thrive at this point was the fact that she started wearing her coloured glasses. So Michelle is somebody who struggles with visual stress, and Ehrling syndrome, as it's known, can affect an awful lot of people with dyslexia. So by starting to wear her glasses and get used to, I suppose, getting beyond almost the social fear of people looking at her and thinking she looked differently, she was able to get past that. And all of a sudden, she states how much of a game changer it was to actually be able to access the resources, go and research documents and on the web and whatnot, and actually feel as if she could actually see what she was looking for almost. So with all that being said, I'll hand back to Michelle.
The difference it made when you put them on and then you read something, and also the atmosphere in a room, because you could have them on when looking up, because obviously overlays are again great, but when you look up, they're not right in front of you. But this then changed the whole atmosphere that I was in, and the brightness of the study rooms and the lecture theatres, and then all the notes that you've got, and then going from all these different books to all these different things was so much easier once I had those. I still have those glasses. And I use them.
Amazing, isn't it? Again, as Mark says, in terms of reasonable adjustments, something so small, a pair of glasses, and that's transformational for you. And it just, the frustration that could have been offered earlier, I'm sure you kind of don't allow yourself too much to look back and think, oh, what if? But these are small things that make a huge difference to a person's learning experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Mark, I don't know if you're having some technical issues. Lost you there for a moment.
I'm back. Yes, I'm back. Sorry about that. I came in at a good time, I guess, in terms of talking about the glasses you've got, Michelle, and the Ehrlings and whatnot. And I think it's interesting that a lot of the time, if people do say that, I'm a person with dyslexia, a lot of people will assume that there is maybe some difficulty with the need for Ehrlings, so the need for a coloured overlay or whatnot. So that's commonly called a co-occurrence. It used to be called comorbidity, but it's not a phrase I like these days, more co-occurrence. So again, I think it's around 50% of people with dyslexia have a requirement for Ehrlings or something along those lines. I'm sure Dr. Neil could correct me there if I'm wrong with that. But again, it is a co-occurrence that we see quite often.
You can have visual stress and not dyslexia. It is also found.
So I guess after that, you did a lot of traveling, right? You went to South America and attempted to learn Spanish, which was where your Spanish tutor pointed out at one point and that kind of let you put less pressure on yourself in terms of learning Spanish. And it was something that, again, you did in your way, and just that understanding of, okay, because I'm dyslexic, that's going to impact that. Just allowed you to just put a bit less pressure on yourself for not getting it straight away.
Yes, I wish I could say the same now, because I put a lot of pressure on myself in my Spanish now. But yes, I definitely learnt it it was really hard to try and learn different language, because I can't work out the tenses and the grammar in my own language. Like, it's really tricky to then do it in a different one.
Yeah.
But I can actually communicate. I can do fairly well, actually. So quite impressed with that, and still do it. Had a class yesterday, in fact. But yeah, I had no idea that it could then obviously impact something like that. It didn't even occur to me until this guy mentioned it, because I was asking questions about English grammar, and it was like, why don't you know this? I was like, I don't know, I missed grammar. Grammar was not my friend. And yeah, he was like, oh, okay. And I explained the dyslexia, and he was like, that makes a lot more sense. That's highly likely as to why you're finding this aspect of Spanish really difficult. So yeah, it's crazy. It impacts on stuff you don't even think about.
Absolutely. It's so diverse, isn't it, the impact? You just think it's literally just reading and writing, but of course it's not. There's lots of stuff around cognition and memory, and obviously Mark's the expert on that, and Neil. But yeah, it just the validation of hearing, oh, that's why, and just, oh, okay, I get that now, and having that slight less pressure is huge. And it's amazing, you know, you went on to do that, you came back, you worked full time then in a mental health service, which was really positive for you, but you struggled with processing, record keeping, making your own systems, you know, to deal with that. You got in trouble for asking for clarification in meetings and stuff. So the actual mental health work, great, but the environment just didn't support you, did it? And you know, that basically that whole experience sounds really traumatic, that you were able to have access to work who were there to support you, but the barriers to actually getting that support sound huge. And it just made you feel, you know, I'm guessing it took you right back to when you were younger and feeling like you weren't good enough again.
Yeah, definitely. Team meetings were really difficult, because I often wanted to just, and it wasn't every team meeting, but there'd be occasional things where I wanted to understand something, like a proposition that was being made, like, okay, let's go this direction. And I was like, I'm just not understanding it. And I was told that I was aggressive and not a good team player because I didn't get it. And I was like, I don't know what I think about it yet, because I don't understand it yet. Once I understand it, I'll tell you what I think about it. And you're right, I did eventually get access to work, but it was probably about a year or so into working there. And then they said, oh, you know, we suggest you get X, Y, Z. And my work were like, so do you need all of it? I'm like, apparently. Like, are you sure? Like, which bit do you need the most? And I really struggled with that. And then I was meant to meet up with this support woman that they'd provided me with. And she said, I'm free on this day and this day. And I was like, well, this day works. But then my work again wouldn't organize it so that my shifts worked to do that. They were like, well, do you have to meet them then? Like, well, that's the appointment I've been given. Like, I'm not trying to be difficult, but apparently, yes, I was. I ended up going off sick from there for quite some time, and was told I was a bully whilst I was there for all of that. So I couldn't return. I never went back.
And just that message of like, you're difficult, you know, you needing things is difficult for us. Do you have to? Well, which bits do you really like? That constant message of like, you're basically a pain for us, Michelle, in seeking what you need.
Ironically, I was their diversity champion. And they loved all the systems I put in place, because I have a very logical brain at times that can see problems that or things that other people weren't seeing. And I thought, why don't we just move this here, put that there, and everything works exact. And they were like, how did you see that? I don't know, it just did. But so they liked stuff that I could do like that, and I was getting involved in all these diversity projects, and I got them a really good name within the organization for it. But then, yeah, the support for me specifically was very lacking, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm back again. Gremlins in the system. but yeah, yeah, that was particularly probably the one that made the one example when we were kind of speaking about this beforehand that made me the most angry, really, knowing there was that reluctance to look to kind of help you. And I think in terms of from a legal point of view, that's against the Equality Act 2010. So, you know, they could put themselves in a pretty sticky position, that employer, if they were to, you know, make you feel that way. That's quite clear discrimination in lots of ways. But also to kind of backtrack a little bit in relation to you saying in, you know, in meetings, they put in a proposal forward, they expect you to be able to answer there. And then again, there's such easy ways to get around that. It could be just your manager sitting down with you for half an hour beforehand, sending you the slides, whatever it might be, just to give you that extra level of extra bit of time to increase your level of understanding. And then you can be there in that meeting, confident, feeling able to contribute. And again, it's just such a reasonable, small little thing that you can do to make a difference. So, yeah, let's see. Dr. Neil's got something to say as well.
Yes, I mean we are within a group that isn't visible. We are not in a wheelchair. We're not walking in a strange way. Therefore, we look this so-called normal. So it's quite hard to say you need to. I mean, my new book is looking at various hidden disability groups, but we are one of that group. So we don't look disabled. Therefore, it is like in exams, getting more time or a scribe. We don't look needy. However, we will still need those things to level the playing field.
Yeah, and the emotional impact of always having to ask.
Yes, to ask. Yes,
it is really significant.
Huge. Yeah.
So, yeah, you it wasn't sustainable, right? You couldn't stay at that workplace. So,
No.
And you know, it sounds like it had a horrendous impact on your mental health through that period. So you took some time, and shortly before leaving, almost as if you anticipated that it was going to be untenable, you'd signed up for a counselling course, so you did that. And you went on to work at an SEN school. Again, something's drawing you to work with people who have these needs that you're so well suited to help people with. And you loved that. And then you got a job at the marketplace, and you said initially you were terrified. You were so scared of like supervision, that kind of environment, because it had been used in the past as just basically, these are all the reasons that you're difficult and these are all the things you're not good at. And so to find a workplace where it wasn't like that was kind of, again, wow, like, well, this is weird, but how lovely. Actually, they are even working with other people now who are neurodiverse, and like just being in an environment that has that support mechanism and understanding and diversity, like it sounds like it couldn't be a more different experience than the previous mental health service you worked for.
No, definitely. It was very difficult at first, because I was, like you say, just terrified of this concept of supervision, because it's not been a positive thing for me. Just a chance to be told what you're doing wrong, and why, and you need to change and all of that. Whereas it wasn't like that. And then working with people who listen, actually, or if I've not understood something, I can say, like, I just don't understand, and can we think of a different, like, can I just have a minute, or can I have this? And I started to be able to feel like I could ask that and say that, and still, it's a big team, so when everyone's together and everyone goes around and has to, when it's the entire team on like a staff day, I'm terrified, because it does that thing where you go around and you've got to say something, and I'm like, oh my god, like, everyone in the room knows my name, but I've still got to tell them my name, and I'm terrified of saying it just out loud, which is just crazy that can still happen. But on the whole, yes, it's I mean, that's a very random like team kind of day. That's not like an everyday like occurrence, obviously. Well, not now anyway. I'd love to have the whole team together. But yeah, just to be able to be treated as if like I actually have something I can contribute and or have feedback that is listened to, whether I'm saying like this was a struggle for me or this wasn't. You know, and I there was some training that we had to do around some systems, and it was done on video. So there's video clips that could be watched, and that was heaven for me, because otherwise it was reading reels and reels and reels of paper, and just to tell me something that a 2-minute video clip could tell me, which once I've seen it visually, I can remember that. And then I was able to help other people that struggled with the video and struggled with the reading, because once I've got it, it almost doesn't go. And I could get something practically quite quickly. That was a game changer. I loved that. I was like, oh, every time, please. But yeah, it's just it's a lot better. And then again with the counselling course, that's also quite interesting, because I've struggled at times to be able to join in the conversation, even though I have my answers. I know what I believe. Tapping my microphone. I know what I believe. I know what I think. But the idea of being listened to and contributing, it's like, well, what are they going to think? And it took me a long time to be comfortable in putting my opinion forward. I always wrote it down in all the journals that I've had to submit and everything, and it was like, I was always encouraged to, actually say this out loud in the room. But it's taken a while, a long time, to feel comfortable in actually saying it in the room, rather than just in my journals that are obviously recorded and marked and everything. But yeah, it's crazy.
I think it's interesting what you say there, Michelle, about a few things there really about, first off, in terms of in the workplace, being in a more inclusive environment, feeling as if you belong. There's people there who want to hear your opinion, so therefore you feel as if you can ask for extra help, ask for a little bit of extra time. Similarly, it sounds as if you're in a good environment in terms of the educational path you're on now, in terms of how that course is being run. And I think the reason I kind of wanted to highlight that as well is we have similar, you could have a similar approach to, say, a learner with ADHD, for example. So if a learner with ADHD knows that they can't move during a session, that's going to cause real distress. Whereas if a learner with ADHD knows that they'd be able to maybe stand up to go to a little area they've agreed with the teacher beforehand, that just knowing that that's an option there, knowing, for example, that you're going to get a video from a meeting instead of reams and reams of writing that you're going to have to read, it makes such a difference in terms of your ability to be present, instead of the fear of what's coming next. What am I going to be asked? Am I I'm going to be expected to try to remember all this. So I suppose what I'm getting at is having that environment where you feel as if you can be you'd be understood in terms of the way in which you are kind of best going to operate and bring the amazing skills that you've described there in terms of your bigger picture thinking and all those kind of things. I think that just, again, it just really illustrates the fact that if we have those inclusive environments, we can allow people to flourish. And it's brilliant to hear that you're in a workplace where you are obviously being able to bring your awesomeness to the floor, I suppose.
Yeah, totally agree. And I guess just to kind of end it, in terms of Michelle's journey, it's so easy to look at that story and think, here was a person who wasn't allowed to do A-levels, who went on to thrive in further education, to do a degree, a master's, work in numerous settings where she helped other people and contributed to society, traveled, learned another language, did a counselling qualification, all of that stuff. And think, wow, what a success story that is. That here's somebody who's overcome so many barriers to achieve all of these things when they were told throughout their entire education system that they weren't able to, and they weren't good enough, and they weren't smart enough. And yet, one of the biggest things that we found, Michelle, is just how much that jars with you, how much discomfort you have around people saying, wow, that's so brilliant, how successful, how, the word successful is one particularly, isn't it, that just catches in your throat and you're like, that's not describing me. And how actually quite painful that's been, where me and Mark are sitting there like, you're so inspirational, this is amazing, this is such an incredible story, and for you it feels wrong, you know, and that's part of what we're talking about. The impact of feeling like you're not successful and you're not good enough is so huge, isn't it?
Yeah, I got all the way through until now, and now I'm crying. It's that word. It's just yeah.
That self-doubt. You learn early on that yes, and that self-doubt is really long term. I mean, of these successful dyslexics I've met, all of them have a chip on their shoulders. There is that little man there to make things better, and the social work is very much about trying to fix a broken system. Something you went through school-based trauma, and now you are trying to make sure no one else goes through that. Does that resonate, Michelle?
Yeah, it does. It's weird to hear. I'm trying like not to cry. But yeah, I know that one of the things I wanted to do when I started working with young people, equality to their like lives. Their experience is obviously different to mine, and for whatever reason. But yeah, just to kind of help somehow.
Yeah, to fix the broken cog, but schools and obviously special needs teams, everyone that works in a school in and obviously special needs has been touched in some way. It could be themselves just being dyslexic. It could be a partner, could be a child. Everyone is drawn to it for a reason. It's because we want to and obviously affect change. I mean, I went through school, hated school, for the idea of me working within a school when I left with like two and obviously O levels is shocking, you know. And it's a similar thing when Mark said Dr. Neil. It sounds wrong. Okay, it sounds I'm the paradox, really. How is someone that struggled to read and write as a child be able to write books and then to do research and then to gain this just this and obviously amazing title? And it is that chip, you know, that chip growing up, that chip that you wanted to prove yourself, worthy, is a huge, and that can be such a motivating force. You know, that's false. But I mean, you were saying early on about being lonely growing up. Many dyslexics and also myself thought I was adopted. I didn't fit in to my family, because all of them could read and write, and on the weekend my mother would say, right, it's reading time now. And we would go off and read for an hour or two, and there was me. I couldn't read. I didn't enjoy books. I didn't fit in. So it's very much that is a common thing. And my first book, you will see it there with a black title there, Dyslexia and Depression. My main motivation was to find out whether I was normal, whether the depression I felt as a child was not normal. And I found out, speaking to nearly 30 dyslexics, a third of them had really depressive traits. Was normal for a dyslexic going through school. It's quite common. However, you will see with the other books there is that you can do well post school. It's just finding your way. And you found through the adult college is that you are able to find your way. It's just the right. It's just the right teaching method. And whilst it might, I mean, I trained 12 years ago to be a teacher, and I needed to go back and do my maths and obviously O levels. I couldn't pass it growing up, but as a adult, within 3 months, I was able to pass it, because I knew that I needed to transform all those theories, algebra A and B, to physical things like an apple and a banana and a cucumber. It's to transform it, to find your way, and for that to be more visual. So it really is. It's the keys. You need to find your own keys, and you can be obviously help. But parents sending a child to a tutor who is going to use the same failed techniques used in a school, that is the wrong way, because you are going to feel even more of a failure there. So I've been through that myself, so I know tutors, if they are the wrong type, just makes things worse.
It was a long time before I realised any link between dyslexia and mental health, and, like, say, the kind of depression. Actually, it was the Access to Work woman who first said, so how is your mental health? And I was like, oh, well, that's not been good for many years, for various reasons. But then she talked about dyslexia and mental health and, like, the links there. And that's actually when I Googled dyslexia and mental health, and the book popped up, and I was like, well, having that then, and bought it. And I mean, I will admit I haven't read the entirety of it, but I remember reading some of it and finding it very difficult, actually, because it was describing sort of aspects of my childhood, and, like, the loneliness and the not just the loneliness but the lowness as well. And it was just, and I guess that's what brought us all here.
yeah, that's true. I mean, my current work is on something called post-traumatic growth. So it is finding growth from trauma, and it is like, imagine a vase, okay, and the vase will break, it shatters, or you've got all these pieces. You can try really hard to put the vase back, but it will never be perfect. And the idea is, this is our schooling. However, say we take those pieces and try to create something new with it, without the obviously structure of school, we're able to create something new and amazing. And it could be a mural, could be a picture, it could be something else. But without the constraints of school, or the way that a vase should look, we're able to do well in life. And it really is, we are taking our trauma and we're using it as a motivating force, and we can do amazing things. It is just, you need to connect with yourself, but also believe in yourself. You have to believe in what you are good at, and you won't value your own skills. However, others will go, wow, Michelle, this is amazing. You really related to to this client. Yes, your gut works really well. You are seeing things no one else sees. Yes, and you pick up on all those small things really fast. No one else does. Okay, so it is about allowing that to praise. You were saying before there, you are happier, I think, with someone being critical rather than someone praising you. Yes,
it's easy.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's
It's hard to take praise because we don't value our own NLP skills. However, others do, and that is why sharing like this allows you to receive that praise, to receive that amazing feedback, is because finally we will realize that we are good at certain things. Yeah. It is hard. It's much easier allowing someone to say, Neil, you spelt that wrong, or my kids say, Dad, you've laid the table the wrong way again. Okay, it's easier taking that rather than someone saying, wow, it's a amazing book at that, Neil. Yeah, but it is our journey. I will shut up.
I feel like standing up and applauding Neil after that. I love that.
That's so, it's so powerful, that idea of taking your trauma forward and into something amazing. And I think, the difficulty, like you describe, of trying to kind of let that praise or validation sink in, let it filter down. It's so hard, isn't it? Because you're so kind of resistant to it internally in the way that you see yourself, that's the stuff that really takes a long time and hard work to change, but it's so amazing. And if anyone resonates with Michelle or has a bit of insight or something to offer in the comments, please do just leave Michelle a comment, because I just think it's so brave of her to come here and share with us and talk about how, even though she's had all this success, that it's still hugely impacting her. You say at the end of your timeline that you still feel constantly lost. You feel like you're a decade behind your peers. You don't fit in with people in your age group, but you feel like you're too old for people who you do resonate more with, because you feel you've missed so much. And that feeling of being lost and a bit lonely and just not quite fitting in, and having that self-worth that's way below where others see you, is something that you're still battling every day, isn't it? So thank you so much for sharing that, and that was really inspiring, Neil, what you shared as well, so thank you both.
Amazing. So
pleasure.
Let's give Michelle a bit of a breather, because she doesn't do well with praise, do you, Michelle? So we'll give you a bit of a breather for now. We'll come back to you, let you compose yourself. So I just wanted to highlight some of the things that come through in the chat, and I just think it's really insightful, I suppose, to see what's come through in terms of the difficulties that people have had, how others, when they've been supporting their students, have been finding mental health is a considerable difficulty that they're having to battle also. And Matthew Lawrence, I hope it isn't too. I hope it's okay for me to share this, but I just thought it was so special in lots of ways, and what you wrote here is to say, if I have thought whether you could have taken a pill or something to make you normal, would you take it? And you'd say the honest answer would be no, I wouldn't. Dyslexia is what makes me me. And being normal is boring. I mean, yes, look at that. Yes, these are difficulties, but I also see advantages. You learn how to cope. You see things differently. I see it as an advantage, and I hope others will also see it as such. That's got me right in the feels, that Matthew, I must say, right in the feels. So with kind of that all being said, I know I mentioned at the outset to see whether anyone had any particular questions for Neil related to Michelle's journey and maybe how it aligns to any of his research. So has anything come through for yourself, Neil, at this stage?
No, nothing's coming through. I mean, some of the obviously questions, the magic pill, yes, it is. It's a common thing coming up. Would you take a pill? Well, no. Well, I think it's all about narrative. I'm a strong believer of narrative, and you write your own story. Now, say that you write a narrative of poor me. Since I had really hard time at school, and there's no way that I will do well in life, then yes, you will see the magic pill as the magic and obviously cure. However, others who will go through very similar schooling, however, will say that, well, I failed early on in school. It isn't, and obviously, emotional for me. I'm fine now trying and obviously different things. I mean, they say that people who will do well in business, millionaires, will fail for their first and second and maybe third try. Now, say that you've never failed in life, you will find that really, really hard. Dyslexics have dealt with failure early on, and they've learned to move on, to use that in a obviously positive way. So they see that the journey is the key. No one ever gets it right first at a time. So if you see your narrative of, well, I struggled in school, I left school with nothing, However, I learned that I'm really great talking, and I can sell things, okay, and that I can fix things, and that I've got these skills that no one values in school, but outside of school they are valued. Then therefore that journey is crucial, and that failure, I hate saying that failure is good, or it is obviously productive. Therefore, they won't take the pill, is because it makes them. They wouldn't be where they are. They wouldn't be successful without that journey. So no, the pill isn't the right thing for them.
Yeah, 100%. Again, we're seeing some really nice comments coming through. So Abby Thomason said, thank you so much for the whole panel. So much honesty and vulnerability being shared, and has been really insightful for me to understand what goes on after school, college or university hours for individuals and the impact on mental health. We have so much impact on those we meet and work with, and I will really reflect on today. Thank you. So thanks very much for that, Abby. I think one that I particularly liked was from apologies if I get this wrong, I think it's Janine. Basically, thank you so much for sharing, Michelle. I will tell my students about you when they are struggling. I mean, how good is that? That is epic. And yes, there's lots more. So please do, folks, before we wrap up, if I could ask you to just send a message to Michelle in particular, if her story has resonated with you, if it's enhanced your level of empathy for people with dyslexia, those maybe who you're teaching. And exactly as Neil's put there, yeah, struggling does mean not giving up. So, yeah, really, really good. I hope as the first Dyslexia Diaries, we will have a number that will follow. Apologies for the gremlins that seem to have raised their head this evening. I hope it hasn't taken away too much from the experience that you've had. So thank you once again to Maeta for providing us with the almost like leading this with her excellent skills and being able to go through this. For Neil as well for coming on board and supporting this. You can see he's got an absolute ton of books, but I certainly recommend get yourself out there, buy this. It is invaluable. If you're thinking crazy enough like me to go and do some form of masters in dyslexia and research, this is going to be your best friend. And better as well to understand your learners. As I said, I'm the director of CogDev Education and Training. We do dyslexic assessments, teacher education and whatnot. This time next week, we've got a session on dyslexia, the what and the how. So if this has been useful for you to understand dyslexia a little bit more, look at maybe the strategies, that could be a session for you. But my last thanks, and the most important thanks, obviously goes to Michelle for being an absolute hero. I mean, we highlighted this about probably 6 weeks ago as a potential of doing this, and it's been a journey. I think you've ran inwards and outwards in terms of the possibility of doing this or not. And again, it just goes to show, and as we look through your story, all of those hurdles you've smashed down to just progress further, to struggle on positively and be that inspiration that that obviously you are hopefully going to come to terms with the fact that, I'm sorry, Michelle, you are an inspiration. You are doing amazing things, and I'm sure you will continue to go on to do absolutely incredible things. So with all that being said, folks, I'm going to hang back for a little bit for anyone who wants to ask any questions. But if not, thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Hopefully see you on future Dyslexia Diaries. Thank you very much for me, and take care. Bye now.